Breaking news out of the White House tonight. A new report from the Washington Post reveals that Ivanka Trump sent, quote, hundreds of emails last year to White House aides, cabinet officials, and her assistants using a personal email account, many of them in violation of federal records rules. In a statement issued via a spokesperson, Ivanka Trump's lawyer attempted to explain away her use of personal email by saying she had only used the personal email account prior to being briefed on the rules governing email usage. Well, if only someone had told Ivanka Trump what the White House policy is on using your personal email before she started working there.
It's unbelievable how Hillary Clinton got away with the email lie, the email scam, the email corruption.
We know Hillary can't be trusted. We've learned that. With America's security, you take a look at her email situation. Can we trust her with our security?
How can Hillary manage this country when she can't even manage her emails?
She doesn't even remember whether or not she was instructed on how to use emails. Were you instructed on how to use? I can't remember.
I guess Ivanka wasn't listening to those rallies. Joining me now, one of the reporters who broke the story, Carol Lenning, political investigations reporter for The Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. Carol, this is kind of fascinating. Somebody in the Trump orbit using personal emails for government business.
It sure is. And it's sort of one of those deja vu, hit your forehead into a wall. What is going on here? Essentially, Ivanka Trump set off a little bit of a four-alarm fire in the White House in the fall of 2017. A public records request found that she was using her personal emails, but when the White House and various lawyers and ethicists in the White House started digging, they realized actually she was using it more than anybody else in the White House. And sometimes she was referring to public business, sometimes she was writing to White House aides about public policy, and sometimes she was doing just logistical arranging, but she was still talking about government work on her personal email. And in this extensive review, which now we finally know about through our reporting, the White House was saying we've got to do something about this because it appears that she's violated the Presidential Records Act multiple times.
So we learned last year that Jared Kushner uses a private email account. Politico is reporting that the presidential son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner has corresponded with other administration officials about White House matters through a private email account set up during the transition last December. That has a slightly more sinister feel to it because it was set up during the transition. But the number of Trump emails now reported to have used private email accounts for government business include Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Stephen Bannon, now gone from the White House, Reince Priebus, now gone, Gary Cohn, now gone, Stephen Miller, still there in the White House. So, again, this may be normal, this may not be normal, but for an administration that ran pretty much an entire campaign about the use of private email for government business. What happens now?
Well, you know, basically, Ivanka Trump's lawyers and her ethical counselor have argued to the White House counsel's office, look, we fixed this problem. She may have violated the rules. She may have made some mistakes, but we fixed it because we've personally gone through all of her emails and reviewed them ourselves. And we've decided which ones are personal, which ones are work. And the ones that are work, we have made sure we've archived and copied back to White House government accounts. Well, does that sound familiar to you? It does to me because Hillary Clinton, as you may remember, said she reviewed her emails with a lawyer, a private attorney, and determined which ones were personal and which ones were public and which ones she would turn over to the State Department for archiving to comply with the law. Now, I mean, there are many differences between Ivanka and Clinton. Ivanka didn't create a server and install it in her basement, but a lot of things are the same, and they are going to touch off a firestorm about why this wouldn't be a higher priority, or why the First Family wouldn't be trying to meet a higher standard after the pretty bitter campaign of 2016 that that hinged on this subject so dearly.
So, Carol, there are a lot of people who watched the campaign, the presidential campaign, and I think rightfully, maybe generationally, wondered what this was about, largely because people, don't understand these things as clearly as they do. Is the White House and the administration now clear on what the appropriate use of personal email versus government email is? Should everybody be very clear on that now?
Well, yes, except, in recent days, we've done some reporting looking at all sorts of different kinds of encrypted or secretive communications that we are told White House officials still use from time to time with foreign officials. I hope that people understand that the Presidential Records Act requires that government business be stored. Everything that they say that has to do with their public job be stored and archived. But, we'll see. I would imagine we might have more eruptions of this kind.
Carol, good to talk to you. Thank you for your reporting on this. Carol Leonnig is a political investigations reporter for The Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. Let's continue this conversation with Neera Tanden. She's the president of the Center for American Progress. She was also Hillary Clinton's policy director during the 2008 presidential campaign. Neera, what comes to mind? What are you thinking about when you're hearing that Ivanka Trump was using personal email for government business? Because there was a time when normal people would have said, oh, maybe they didn't know.
I mean, if my eyes could roll back so far into my head, they just might not come back. I mean, here's the issue. It's really, it's hard to know what is more at work here, just an incredible arrogance, or I have to just say stupidity, because the truth is Ivanka Trump claiming that she didn't know about the rules, no one briefed her. Did she not hear about the lock her up chants on this subject that redounded through halls throughout this country at the demand of her father? Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole thing is ludicrous. I mean, what I think is important about this moment is the Presidential Records Act is really about preserving records. Exactly what Ivanka Trump did here is really what Hillary Clinton did in the form and function. And my view is every Republican, every single Republican that excoriated Hillary Clinton, that made her testify for 11 and a half hours, should demand to hear from Ivanka Trump on this subject. And if they don't, we will all know that all of that was hypocrisy after hypocrisy. And we may just say, oh, this is just another Trump scandal. But the truth is, this was the core argument against Hillary Clinton. This is the argument of that animated lock her up chants that they still use. That still
continues.
That still continue. And I think it's outrageous that Republicans will just get away with not holding a hearing. I expect Lindsey Graham to hold a hearing on this.
The frustration, of course, is that the Republicans, Trey Gowdy went on this. I mean, how long did this go on for? 2-3 years? They went on with it for a long time, for 40 hearings. And a lot of people in the country sort of said, what are you all carrying on about? This is a little bit ridiculous. I guess applying that standard, should Republicans demand that from Ivanka Trump, or have we all come around to the idea that some of this is bad policy, some of this is bad practice, and some of it's ridiculous?
Hey, I think what should happen is one of the reasons why Democrats won the House back is for accountability, simple accountability. So when scandals like this erupt, we actually have an answer, a response, instead of everyone sweeping it under the rug.
Right.
So I hope Congressman Cummings holds hearings on this, and he should just ask the simple question of Ivanka Trump. Is what Hillary did wrong and what you did right? And I'd love to know her answer. And if she violated the Presidential Records Act, she should be held accountable just like any other person in the administration.
Kind of remarkable, though, when you see that list of 6 people in and around the White House who were doing this, given that an entire campaign was run on the basis of this.
I'll just say they did this. She did this. The White House has been run like there's no accountability. And the good news is that changed on November 6th.
Neera, good to see you as always. Thank you. Neera Tanden is the president of the Center for American Progress.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.